Hi everyone, welcome to the Top Floor CEO podcast. We've got an exciting edition today. We've got Hamish Jenkinson that's had an amazing journey. He's basically worked with a number of stars in the past, Guy Ritchie, Madonna, Michael Bublé. He's directed and led high-profile events for immersive experiences and things like the opening ceremonies for the Champions League, FA Cup final. And he's got top brands trusting him, Formula One racing, BMW, Omega, Adidas. So much in this podcast. He's going to share the journey from start to finish, including all the warts, etc., and the things. So you're going to learn a lot from Hamish. And so, Hamish, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be on the Top 4 podcast.
Excellent. And so just tell me where things started. Just tell me where you got the interest from, and so where do you think the start of the journey is that got you to where you are today?
It's hard to put my finger on it, but it's funny. We live in an age now where people are constantly bombarded on social media, and it's all this like be your own boss, and everyone's an entrepreneur, and everyone's got a side hustle. And I'm just not sure it's true, right? I just think not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur, and not everyone is cut out to have like a side hustle. I think, be careful what you wish for, because you might be wishing for family holidays where you're, constantly having to take sneaky phone calls, or the day before you go on holiday with your family, that massive deal's just gone and you're just like crushed and you've got to pump yourself up again. So, where did it begin for me? I guess you could trace it back to me graduating from university. I'd done a drama degree, and I think that's given me a great storytelling ability. I dabbled around this and that, and my great friend Johnny Grant, we'd met at school. He went and did a different degree to me. I was up at Birmingham doing drama. He was at Middlesex doing his drama degree. And when we both graduated, I moved to Cockfosters, North London, near Middlesex University. He had a student house, and I wanted to get out of Birmingham by that point. I was done after 3 years. Loved it. No offense to any Birmingham people listening. It's a great city. And so we thought, let's set up a company. And one of the great things about being in the UK is that it is incredibly simple to set up a company, right? You go on Companies House, you search whether the name's free, and if it's free, you buy it. Costs you hardly any money, and away you're off to the races. You've got a company.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize at the time was there's a lot more to running a company. And so that first company was called Golden Monkey Productions. I've still got, paperwork from it. It never had a bank account. It never generated any revenue. And all that happened was HMRC chased me and Johnny for years for, to get the company dissolved properly and to pay a tiny bit of tax. So, company number one, I would say, was an absolute disaster. It got, nowhere.
What did you learn from that experience, Hamish?
Well, I think, it's interesting because the department, I started that in 2013, and I started that with Johnny Grant, the same friend that I had started Golden Monkey Productions with, back in the early 2000s. It was probably almost more than a decade later. And the very first thing we did was recognize that we didn't want to make the same mistakes that we'd made last time, and that really both of us were very entrepreneurial. We'd made some money by this point, by 2013. So we each put, I think it was about 20,000 each. We put £20,000 in the company. And when we got a sniff of our first job, we realized that actually we needed a producer. And so the very first thing we did was to hire a producer, someone that had a skill set that we didn't. we were great creatives. We were great at meeting clients. We were great at selling a vision, but actually putting the budget together and making sure that, you know, their budget matched our creative vision and that we could still make some money out of that was crucial. And so, you know, in the department's journey, Jess was our first hire, and we quickly realized that she had a skill set that was something that we needed. So we made her an equal partner. So, you know, within the first sort of 3 months of starting the department, it was not 2 founders, it was 3. And I'm someone that has struggled, let's say. I'm dyslexic. They tease me a lot at the office and say I'm undiagnosed ADHD, and I do tend to get excited about all sorts of different things and come up with new ideas in the middle of a meeting when we're meant to be thinking about one client for a different client. And the poor rest of the company really struggle to keep up. So I think, you know, for me, I've always recognized that I have deficiencies in certain areas. And so recognizing where my strengths are and playing to those strengths, and then backfilling, figuring out how I can bring in the talent that I need. You know, there are companies out there that are very successful that are kind of, you know, small. They keep their team really, really small because they can do the budgeting, they can do the, you know, they can do the creative, they can do the visualization. They've got this great kind of skill set. I don't feel like I've got any of those, right? I don't know how to use Photoshop. I don't think I've ever filled in an Excel spreadsheet, a number in an Excel spreadsheet in 11 plus years of running the department.
Wow.
You know, and that's quite a shocking admission
Sure.
to make. It feels slightly embarrassing to say it, but it's not the skill set that I have. I'm surprised myself, but you know, when we have our monthly board meetings and I get handed a sheet of paper and it's got all of the data in there, and I look at it, and I probably should have been looking at it the night before, and I scan it and what's that? Why is that there? And I look at, you know, Irina, the finance manager, I look at Adam, my CFO, and they look down and they're like, that shouldn't be there. I'm like, okay, well, what happens if that comes out then? And then the Excel spreadsheet gets up on a big screen. We look at the numbers again. Okay, all right, fine. So I do have skills, but I don't spend my time focusing or, you know, swimming against the current, against the kind of the skill set that I have.
That's really good and very humble. What advice would you give to people to make sure they get the right people and avoid bad hires?
Well, the first bit is to look internally. You know, if you're not looking internally into what it is that, you know, you feel best skilled at, best capable at delivering, you're not going to know what you need to supplement your organization. So for me, I've recognized that the best thing that I can do is sell creative dreams to my clients. And I want producers, and I want finance function, and I want those bits really handled by good people that are far better and quicker than me at delivering on those.
Fantastic. How did you get to work with Guy Ritchie and Madonna?
Well, I said I trained as an actor, so I arrived at the first day. I'd been a big fish at school, let's say. I got to play Romeo in the sort of end of school production. I played the hero part. I'd actually been on stage on the English National Opera playing a role. So I'd had these like lovely acting experiences. And then when I got to university and found myself in like a whole swarm of actors, I was like, Jesus Christ, everyone's ego is out of control. I do not want to be an actor. And so over the course of like my 3 years, I started directing. And I found that to be incredibly interesting because as a director, you give, right? You give ideas, you give suggestions, you shape. And so in a way, when I was directing a theatre show, you could see a little bit of yourself in the granny, and you could see a little bit of yourself in the kid, because you'd given these notes, these directions, these try it that way, try it that way. And so the journey for me was like, why don't I try and become a director? And you start off by, you know, becoming a T-boy, a runner, the lowest of the low. And it was pretty low. You know, I can remember being on, like, you know, shooting a commercial, and, you know, you're being paid. You're not, as a runner, you're not part of any of the unions. You're at the lowest rung, right? So if you're a director, you're part of the Directors Guild of America, or the BAFTA version. And it's the same with the Sparks. They have their union. They're the guys that look after the electricity to get to the lights and stuff like that. And the camera crew have their union. And I remember being on set, and it was like, we got to overtime, and we'd had an hour of overtime, and one of the Sparks looked at me and laughed and said, "I've just earned more than you earned all day in 1 hour's overtime." And it was crushing. But I stuck at it, and I kept kind of like trying to find little opportunities, ways to kind of build my career. And I worked out that actually, you know, on commercials, it was very hard for me to jump up a level. But what happens is directors would be looking for an opportunity to, you know, do a passion project or make a short film. And on those short films, they had tiny budgets. So they'd be looking for, you know, people that would work for kind of no money, or very little money, or just expenses. But that's an opportunity for you to go from being a runner to being a third AD or being a second AD. And so I was working on a short film. I'd worked my ass off for the producer, and at the end of it, he said, you know, "What have you got planned next?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm freelance." And he said, "Well, I know this guy. He's looking for some help. He's just finished a movie called Swept Away." Less said about the movie, the better. It's not one of Guy Ritchie's better movies. And he needs someone to help him out. So I was like, "Well, who is it?" And it was like, "Guy Ritchie." I was like, "Oh my God." I mean, he'd just done Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels. He was about the most cool director we had. And so I went for my job interview. I was there in their private residence. It was beautiful, beautiful house in Marble Arch. I sat in the sort of lobby waiting area. I chatted to some of the staff that were there. I'll come back to that, actually. It's quite interesting. But so I went in, I had my job interview with Guy Ritchie. He said, "When could you start?" There was a little piece of paper there. I wrote my number down, and I said, "I'll start as soon as you give me a call. I'm going to go to a coffee shop round the corner."
Was he a tough interviewer?
No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. I mean, he was intimidating,
Right.
right? Guy Ritchie's been, it's probably quite well known. He's been a massive Brazilian jiu-jitsu fan. And he is like, he's hench, he's tough. But you know, he was very nice. I went round to the coffee shop. I waited over like 2.5 hours. I was like, "Oh man, maybe I've been too cocky. I shouldn't have said I'll start when you give me a call. That was stupid." And but lo and behold, the phone rang, and Guy Ritchie's voice said, "Where are you?" And I said, "I'm at a coffee shop round the corner." And he said, "Grab me an Evening Standard and a cup of coffee. I'll see you back at the office in a minute. You got the job." And so I walked back in, and that was it. A nice anecdote, though, on that. I subsequently learned that it wasn't the job interview that I'd done with Guy Ritchie that had made the difference to me getting the job.
Okay.
What had actually made the difference was, as you can imagine, with a house that had Guy Ritchie and Madonna in it, you know, there were a good deal of support staff. So there was a sort of caretaker, there were 2 nannies, there was Madonna had 2 assistants. And one of them was a wonderful guy called Nick Moss. And he was the guy that I was chatting to before my interview with Guy Ritchie. And it turns out that the conversation I had with him was actually more impactful than the interview with Guy Ritchie.
Fantastic.
Because the conversation I'd had with him, we'd got on really well. We'd both studied A-level biology. We had mutual interests, and we really got on. And I only found out after the fact that Guy had called him in and said, right, who shall I hire? And they'd had a conversation, and Nick had said, well, like that guy Hamish, he was nice. He'd studied biology. We got on. He likes reggae music. And so I sort of owe a huge debt, and I tell him every time I see him, to Nick. I then worked for Guy for like a year, and it was incredible. But again, I was being paid so little money. When you start out in your career, it is absolutely brutal. And look, I'm lucky. I'm a middle class, white, probably got all the privilege and all the rest of it. But I was living in a house in Cockfosters in North London, and to be able to continue in that job, I had to say, look, guys, sorry, I can't afford the rent anymore. I'm going to couch surf. So I had a really shitty Vauxhall Astra. I used to drive to my parents, load it up with about 2-3 weeks worth of clothes in the boot. And then back in the day, you could park in London. So I'd park the car close to their house. And then, I'd go to the car, I'd change some clothes, and then I'd call up mates and be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And they'd be like, oh, yeah, I'm out, come. And I'd be like, yeah, not tonight. And I'd call someone else, and they'd be like, oh, just at home chilling. And I'd be like, well, can I come and stay? And people were incredibly generous, because I was, 21, 22, something like that. And, I couch surfed for a year. I came back to my car one day. The boot had been smashed in. There was nothing of value in the car. It was just changes of clothes. And I could see it strewn across the street. It was just a mess. And I was like, do you know what? I've done a year of working for Guy Ritchie. He hasn't made a movie since Swept Away. Maybe it's time no one can take that off my CV now. So I wrote 2 letters of resignation, really, one to Guy, one to Madonna. She called me into the office and she was like, what's this about you resigning? I was like, well, I've had an incredible time. I've been here a year, but I've been couch surfing. I can't afford rent. I'm done. She went, how much is he paying you a day? Sorry, a week. And I was like, well, he's paying me this. I wish I'd said a higher number. Anyway, she said, I'll pay you that a day. You work for me now. And I said, okay. So yeah, I got to work with her on Sticky and Sweet Tour, which was amazing. I was on the set of Die Another Day. She played a brilliant cameo kind of role on that James Bond movie. And it opened up a world to me, let's say, a world of privilege, but also the work that she put in was just unbelievable. She is so hardworking. That was what kind of blew me away about it, was, the level of commitment to her craft just astounded me. And it was so kind of inspiring to be around that, to know that, it wasn't fluke. It was, complete dedication to the craft. She was always working, always had projects on the go, whether it was writing children books, new albums, preparing for concerts. The level, she was probably worth 300 million at the time. There was no like sitting back on your laurels. She was 100% committed to her craft and continuing her career. So I owe a huge debt to both Madonna and Guy Ritchie. I've bumped into them a couple of times over the years and been able to say thank you, which has been super wonderful.
Excellent. So tell us about the next stage. And you worked for there, not much money, you met a few times. So tell us about the next stage.
Well, I bobbed around. So, as an actor, you basically you graduate from your acting degree and then you become event staff. So my first experience of like the event world was the event staff, so experiential stuff. I can remember walking around Lord's cricket ground and the Oval cricket ground, handing out little, samples of cider to people. That was hilarious fun, because you got a barrel full of cider and everyone's so happy to see you when you come along, and it's like one shot for you, one shot for me. We did Bacardi Breezer activations. I did I did straight to wok noodle demonstrations at almost every Tesco superstore across the land. So I would drive up with my little van, park it in front of Tesco's, set out my trestle table, my thing, straight to wok noodles, sampling it out to people. And there, the acting, you can see how that really like it paid off. I mean, I had the chance. So it gave me a taste of kind of the events in the experiential world early on. I had a 3 shaved into the back of my head when 3 Mobile came 3. And then an opportunity to work at the Old Vic, which is a beautiful 200-year-old theatre, came up, and I took it because I did still have that love for theatre, and it was a really interesting role. So I worked there. I was really enjoying it. There was some incredible productions, amazing directors that we worked with. The late great Robert Altman, Sam Mendes directed a show there. Some really like, you know, incredible productions, beautiful shows. And when I was there, I was kind of, again, infused in the kind of immersive theatre world. And there was this talk of this theatre company called Punch Drunk. And so I went and saw this show called Mask of the Red Death at the Battersea Arts Centre. And it just blew my mind because for the first time, when you go to the theatre, you sort of sit down and you say, right, entertain me. And you're passive in the experience. And it's either a great show or it's disappointing, but you're not kind of involved. Now, what Punch Drunk had done was really right at the start of what, you know, immersive experience is probably one of the biggest buzzwords now, right? Everything's immersive. And so I went and I saw this show. I was completely blown away by it. And at the same time, part of what I ended up doing at the Old Vic was fundraising. And I loved artists. And so I did a big art fundraiser. And I managed to get artworks from Damien Hirst, from Tracy Emin, from Banksy. And this art auction raised like, I think it was about £900,000. So it was hugely successful for the charity.
From Tracy Emin and Bank. How did you get those artworks?
Writing to them and knowing about them and explaining why this was a very special theatre. You know, the Old Vic, it's this, maybe, you know, it's not a West End theatre, it's down on the South Bank, the dirty South. But it was the home of the National Theatre. Laurence Olivier started the National Theatre there before it moved to its, you know, brutalist building on the South Bank now. People don't know, but the Royal Ballet started at the Old Vic Theatre. Morley College started at the Old Vic Theatre. The Young Vic, which is another theatre right next door to it, started as an offshoot from the Old Vic before gaining its independence and producing its own work. So it's this real powerhouse of like creative stuff. And so once you could explain that to the artists and that it didn't get any government subsidy and that it was a really important theatre to support, they tended to get on board. But it had tapped me into the world of Banksy. And, you know, he wasn't the big artist that he is today with, you know, probably his most 18 million was the highest priced piece of work that's been sold. I wish I'd bought a few more pieces off him than I did. But anyway, he basically loved Waterloo, and he used to spray paint little rats with signs next to the bins saying designated picnic areas, the last place you'd want to have a picnic. And he was doing an exhibition called the Cannes Festival. And he closed off a tunnel underneath Waterloo train station. It was the old Eurostar entrance. Eurostar had moved to King's Cross. And so suddenly this tunnel, he negotiated with Ken Livingstone that you could have people spray paint down there without fear of being arrested or getting a criminal record or anything like that. It was one of the few places in London where you could, as an artist interested in street art, go do your stuff. You'd probably come back the next day and someone had spray painted over it. But to launch it, Banksy brought 80 different graffiti artists from around the world, and it was a truly insane exhibition. I got to go down there before it opened to the public, and so it was boarded up at either end of the tunnel. And so with all of these spray painters, Network Rail had opened up these side tunnels. And so to try and get some air flowing, otherwise people would have been choking down there. And as I was walking down, I was like, and I discovered like 2 football fields of vaulted tunnels underneath Waterloo train station. And it was extraordinary. It was like, what? How can this much space and incredible vaulted ceilings? And like, you know, it was full of trash, don't get me wrong. But it turned out it had been abandoned for 30 years. It just wasn't, you know, it just wasn't prime real estate. And no one had maybe the vision that I had of what the space could be. And so I asked the theatre company Punch Drunk whether they would come and take a look at it. They said, wow, this is amazing, but it's also like chaos down here. If you can raise the money, we can create a show. And so over the next period, I just desperately spoke to all the producers and investors and awards. And we ended up writing some grants, and we were successful in raising £500,000 to produce our first show called Tunnel 228. It was a collaboration between the Old Vic Theatre, the Young Vic Theatre, and this company Punch Drunk, who were, in my opinion, the most exciting theatre company that were creating immersive experiences where you stepped into the world and you wandered around that world. And the more you gave to the experience, the more you got out of it. And that to me was just incredibly refreshing and exciting. And when the show opened, it was a huge hit. It was page 3 of the Evening Standard. The Guardian called it one of the best shows of the decade. I remember, you know, the doors opened, the people came in, and I could see the reaction on people's faces. And I came out and I watched people in the queue, and I was, you know, I don't know, 20 something, 28, I don't know. And I was there and I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to do anything as good as this again. I might have just, you know, that might be it for me. That might be the peak. And that began a 4-year journey of running this space called the Old Vic Tunnels. I then went on to do a show with Secret Cinema, who are also one of these great immersive theatre companies, and many of the kind of theatre companies that are producing brilliant work in London and around the world now
You
cut
do
their teeth.
under Secret Cinema.
What's that?
Do Dirty Dancing under Secret Cinema.
No, well, they did do Dirty Dancing. They've done a whole host of different shows, but that wasn't the show we did. We did Battle of Algiers, which is a film that everyone should watch. It's absolutely incredible. Won the Best International Film Oscar, Palme d'Or, everything it could. It was about the kind of 1972, I think, Algerian uprising against the colonial powers that were the French at the time. And it's got the most incredible scenes, but it was this just unbelievable experience. Like, I'd been working in this venue for ages and I kept getting lost because it was so immersive, and you would wander around and you would be either co-opted into the French side or the Algerian side. You wandered around, you ate food. It was just this, you know, I still have I have parents that go to my kids' school, and, you know, known them for about 6 years now, and we were chatting the other day, and you don't really talk about work, you talk about the kids, but something came up and I talked about the tunnels, and they were like, oh my God, we went there. And they proceeded to tell me, like, over half an hour, everything that they remember from this show. And for me, as like an experienced creator, to know that I've been involved in these experiences where people can recall, you know, how they felt, what they were wearing, things that happened to them, you know, a decade later, that, you know, you're doing something special, and it's just an incredibly rewarding experience. But, you know, it was incredible. We launched the Vaults. That venue's still running. If you go to Leek Street now, maybe I didn't start it, right? Banksy started it with his graffiti. He handed the baton to me. I took it and ran with it. And over 4 years, I built out just like 2 massive venues. It was without doubt one of the most exciting places to be in London, just an extraordinary place to come and be a part of this new wave of immersive experiences. But what I hadn't done was, there's an old 200-year-old building here. And then there is a production company that makes the shows at the Old Vic. And then there was me in this underground tunnel doing these wild, crazy nights. And what I hadn't realized was that I needed these organizations, and I hadn't built enough bridges.
Right.
And I hadn't taken them on the journey with me. So they were over here worried about a lift that was breaking and the toilets that didn't work and all of these different things. And here was me going, I am creating the most cutting edge, most experiential, most immersive, most incredible productions. But I didn't realize that really the power lay here. So although I was a director of the Old Vic Tunnels company, the lease sat with this organization here, this 200-year-old building and trust. And one day they called me into the office and they said, we need to shut the tunnels down. We're going to focus on a big capital campaign. A capital campaign is like to raise money to renovate the building. This is a distraction, what you're doing, Hamish. And so we're closing it down. You need to make 18 people redundant tomorrow.
Blimey.
And I held it together. I sat there with the chief executive, Kate Vara. She's now the chief executive in the National Theatre. And one by one, they came in. Hello, Mike Harth. Really sorry. I'm going to have to make you redundant. And, this grown man, older than me, experienced. He's joined me, been on that journey for 4 years. He's got kids. He's got mortgage. And, Lucy, my marketing director, she had a contract at the Old Vic. She left the Old Vic. She signed a new contract with me at the tunnels, and here I was making her redundant. She loved her role. She loved the theatre, and I don't think she's ever gone back to it. And I feel terrible to this day, to be honest. But that was it. Yeah. 18 people made redundant in one day. We'd had a big theatre festival called the Vault Festival in the Vault venue. We'd funded a big chunk of it. We put £100,000 into that theatre festival, and we lost it all. And it was crushing for me. That
imagine, yeah. It sounds like a bad setback. But so how did you pick yourself up and then go on to the next thing?
Well, I didn't right away. I mean, to be honest with you, it was pretty bad. For a while, it was pretty bad. I had the benefit of still being on an Old Vic salary, a portion of my salary. So I didn't get sort of made redundant overnight. But I had no role. I hadn't worked at the theatre for 4 years now. So, my role was no longer required. They didn't want me, but they kind of recognized to kind of make me redundant they kind of needed me to wrap everything up at the tunnels and shut the venue down. Brilliantly, House of Vans, the street company, took it on, and they built House of Vans. The Vault Festival that I lost 100 grand on became the biggest immersive theatre festival annually for years afterwards. So, sometimes you need to lose some money on the inaugural one so that you can go on and become the biggest festival. But me personally, no, I mean, my life fell apart. I broke up with my girlfriend. I moved out of my house. The house I owned, I ended up selling it to my ex-girlfriend.
Sure. So I just want to move on, Hamish.
Surfed again.
Time left. So I just want to move on to obviously
the department.
Yeah, so the department and Immersive Futures. Just tell us how you went from there to where you are now, and how
it was Johnny. So Johnny had run a digital film company, and he was cutting edge at the time. So he'd gone let's not film commercials on film, let's do it digitally, and that was cutting edge. But very quickly lots of other people came into that space, and it became very cramped and competitive. And so what was fun for him for 7 years had become a bit of a grind, and he was ready to try something new. I was unemployed. We both had our very successful original company in our minds, and we thought, why not do that again?
Brilliant.
And this idea of what we were doing at the tunnels was beyond experiential marketing. We were creating immersive marketing kind of thing. So what about we tap into the talent of Secret Cinema, of Punch Drunk, of these incredible lighting designers, production designers, and then we take that to market to the CMOs and the people, and we say, look, forget about experiential marketing. What you want to be doing is immersive marketing. You want to be taking your consumer and putting the heart of the experience. You want to be giving them agency so they become involved, so that they become an active participant. They're going to feel way more passionate about the brand if you can do that kind of thing. And so we launched with this incredible roster of talent from the best of the best in immersive experiences. Johnny, with his film production background, knew how to go and tap into, PR companies and publicists and Ogilvy and say, what briefs have you got coming up for, experiential, but we call it immersive. And we were inundated with offers, actually. We kept getting these briefs for like 50 grand, 20 grand, 30 grand.
Brilliant.
We would try and service all of them, but we just couldn't do it because, if you're trying to do stuff in real life, it costs.
Sure.
20, 30 grand is not really a huge amount of money to be able to pull off a big, immersive, theatrical thing. And you quickly learn that when you're doing something in the arts sector, people behave in a totally different way. Right. Their day rates are different.
Profitable business then to get deals where you couldn't make money on, but also
it was horrific. We were dying a death, and I think about maybe after a couple of years we just said, you know what, this isn't working, let's just say no to anything under £250,000 and see what happens. Brilliant. So we just said no, and it was petrifying because by that point I'd put, although it doesn't sound much, when we put 20 grand in, it basically felt like our life savings from, when we were 20 to when we were about 30. That was it. That was how much money we'd raised.
So just obviously, we're running out of time, Hamish. So what you shared was amazing, and your storytelling skills are phenomenal. So what would you just advise to entrepreneurs? What would you give, for people that have had downs that you've had about picking yourself up?
Well, let's take a few things, right? We all have down days. We all have down days. This week's been a bloody down week. I got hit with a tax bill I wasn't expecting. We lost an incredible Toyota pitch that would have been 800 grand. And it was just like, oh man, why? But you just, when it gets like that, just put one foot in front of the other. Just carefully put one foot in front of the other. Don't build a to-do list of shit that, excuse me, beep. Don't build a to-do list of stuff that you can't do and can't achieve. If you're feeling like, a dog's dinner, put some things in there that drink a glass of water. I think I can manage that.
I'll join you.
Tick. There you go. You're already feeling better about yourself. So, don't beat yourself up. There's definitely going to be highs and lows, and
excellent.
You've got to be prepared to have a really thick skin and be able to kind of bounce through those. Absolutely. And when it gets really tough, don't think too far ahead. Don't get scared by like distant horizons. Just go, what can I do that's meaningful today, right now, that I know if I write it on a list, I'm going to be able to tick it off by the end of the day, and I can feel better about myself.
Great advice. So, Hamish, how can people contact you if they want to get in touch?
Well, I'm Hamish Jenkinson on Twitter, Hamish Jenkinson on Instagram. That's absolutely fine. Hello at the-department.co.uk. Think carefully about what you call your company. I called it The Department. I went to the English Embassy in Paris last week for an event about the Olympics, and my little badge said The Department. Everyone kept coming up to me going, what department are you from? And I was like, not international trade, I'm afraid. I am The Department.
Brilliant. Interesting. Hamish, I want to thank you very much. Lots of insightful things and very exciting story. And I know everyone listening to this is going to enjoy it thoroughly and gain a lot from it. Thank you very much for joining me today, Hamish.
No worries.